What's happening, guys? Arouge again, and today we're going to continue with community ecology. So today what we're going to cover, we're going to review a habitat versus a niche. We're going to go a little more in depth on that. We're going to cover what a generalist versus a specialist is. We're going to cover two principles. We have the competitive exclusion principle, and then the last one is resource partitioning. Okay, so let's go over a habitat versus a niche. Simply put, and we've heard this before, a habitat is an organism's home, is residence, where it dwells at, where it lives, where it spends its days. The niche, on the other hand, is the organism's home, or what it's doing in that, the niche is its role or job, or what it's doing in that home. So if we look at this one little habitat, this log, we could see a variety of different organisms that may live there. Even though they all share the same habitat, such as this log, their role is a little bit different. So for example, this millipede, its role within this habitat would be to consume decaying leaves or vegetation. This ant is going to consume decaying dead insects, okay? This centipede, which looks like it's made for battle, is actually going to attack and consume other living insects. The moss, which is a living thing in this same habitat, is decomposing this wood, this log, and this earthworm is going to return nutrients back down to the soil because that's where they dwell at. They live in the soil, okay? So even though all of these have the same habitat, their job or role is very, very different. So if you don't have these already, go and take note of this. The habitat, organism's home, the niche, the organism's job or role. Please take note of this on your first set, okay? So let's cover what a generalist versus a specialist is. A generalist is a species that can generally consume a variety of resources, okay? So for example, if we take a look at a weed, this weed can generally live almost anywhere. It can grow in a variety of places. If there's a lot of water, if there's a little bit of water, if there's nutrient soil, if the soil is deficient. A raccoon can also be a generalist because they could eat anything. I mean, they could go survive out in the wilderness, or they could go steal your cat food. Okay, so those are generalists. They eat anything, and if we're talking about plants, they could grow in a wide range of areas. On the other hand, we have a specialist. A specialist can only thrive to specific resources. So examples of specialists would be like pandas and koalas. Okay, the koala can only eat or can only thrive if it has a good supply of eucalyptus, whereas the panda can only thrive if it has a good supply of bamboo. Specialists do not adapt well, okay? I repeat, they do not adapt well. So if the environment is changing, these folks are the most at danger, okay? Because they rely on a specific set of conditions. Go ahead and take note of this slide as well, please. And those examples as well. Okay, the next thing that we're going to cover is what's called the competitive exclusion principle. It's kind of a beast of a word, but let's figure out what this means. So there was this experiment that was done where they took two single-celled organisms, Paramecium caudatum and Paramecium aurelia. And if they put each single-celled organism in a separate petri dish, each of them thrived independently on their own. However, since these two single-celled organisms had the exact same niche, they had the exact same resource, and they consumed that exact same resource at the same time, what would happen when they put them in the same exact environment? Every single time, the Paramecium caudatum went extinct in the petri dish. Paramecium aurelia outcompeted them. They were able to consume those resources faster and better, driving the other species to extinction, okay? So we call this the competitive exclusion principle. What that states, if two species have the exact same niche, I repeat, if they have the identical niche, one will drive the other to extinction. So if we go back to this example over here, we already explained each of these organisms have a very different role or purpose living in this area. However, if all of a sudden the centipede, the moss, the earthworm, the ant, and the millipede, if all of a sudden they were, let's say, competing for who can eat the log the best, Well, the moss might do a really good job, okay? Or if they were competing for who could attack other insects the best, well, the centipede would outcompete the others. So to avoid that competition, they have to have other niches, okay? If they had the exact same niche, one will drive the other to extinction. And that is the competitive exclusion principle. A good way to think of it, if I bring you guys pizza and I only bring one pizza, or I bring a lot of pizza and I say, hey, whoever could eat the most pizza, go for it, there's going to be competition and there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers because everybody's going to try to consume the exact same resource. That would be the pizza, okay? Now, we have another concept to cover, and that is called resource partitioning. Resource partitioning is when similar species use a resource in a way to avoid the competition, okay? So let me explain. And please take note of this as well. This is the last set of notes. People thought this was an exception, how the warblers lived. And they said, you know what? Competitive exclusion states that if they all have the same resource, they're going to drive each other to extinction. Well, let's take a look at these warblers. They all live in the exact same tree, and they all have the exact same food. So this must be an exception to the rule. Well, when they looked further at how these warblers, how these birds were able to coexist in the same habitat with the same niche, or what seemed like the same niche, what they found was they were able to partition, okay, or divide. Partitioning is another word for dividing. They were able to divide their niche in certain ways to avoid competition. So for example, this warbler right here said, hey, you know what? I'm only going to dwell on the outside areas, on the outskirts. The Cape May warbler said, you know what? I'm only going to dwell in the upper areas, okay? And the yellow rumped warbler said, you know what? I'm only going to dwell on the bottom areas. There was some area of overlap, and that they probably had different behaviors for consuming those resources. But essentially, all of these birds said, let's divide up a little bit so that way there is no competition. And that's resource partitioning, okay, to avoid the competition, okay? And please take note of that slide. So an example of resource partitioning would be like this. Let's say instead of saying, I bring a pizza for everybody, or just pepperoni pizza, let's say that I bring a variety of pizza. I bring pepperoni, I bring cheese, I bring combination, and even I bring pineapple for those that think pineapple on pizza is okay. There will be a partitioning of these resources. Some people will say, you know what? I don't like the pepperoni. I'm not a meat eater, so I'm just going to stick with the cheese pizza. A few people may say, you know what? I prefer the pineapple on the pizza. I'm okay with that. So I'm only going to consume this right here. And, you know, there may be other people that say, you know what? I like the bell peppers and the sausage on the pizza. So they would consume the combination. This would be an example of resource partitioning. Instead of everybody attacking all the resources at once, divide them up, okay? And then everybody gets to coexist, even though they may seem like they're having the same niche. It's slightly different, okay? All right, so a quick recap. We have habitat versus niche. Habitat is the home. The niche is the job or role. Perfect. A generalist is an organism that could generally live in most areas. They're very, very well at adapting. A specialist is not very well at adapting. They need special resources. Okay, so this would be like a raccoon or even a dog. Specialist would be like a panda or a koala bear. Competitive exclusion states that if two species compete for the same exact niche, one will go extinct. Resource partitioning is behavior that species may divide up the resources and the niche in slightly different ways to avoid competition. That is it for today, folks. Go ahead and like, subscribe, hit that little bell to stay current on all things bio, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.